Hey everyone, my name's Jack, I'm the Avid assistant, and welcome to this first part in my first attempt at a course. So this is part one. This will be creating the Avid project and setting it up in some useful settings and getting into stuff like that, as along with a couple of other little tidbits. It did come to about half an hour in the end, so it's a little bit long. I apologise for that. I'm still a little bit new to this and I can go on and on a bit sometimes. I did edit it down, the full recording was about an hour in the end up. But as always, of course, there will be chapter markers on this video so you can skip ahead if there's a bit that you already know. And this will feed in nicely to subsequent chapters. We'll be going into ingesting media and syncing and all kinds of things throughout the course. So you can always skip ahead or just wait for the next module or whatever's most useful to you. By the time you're seeing this, it'll already be on YouTube and you can watch whatever part of it you like. So that's enough of me blabbering on. Let's get into it, eh? Right, so here we are. We're going to start by creating a project. I've loaded Avid. I'm at my project selection screen that comes up. But we don't want any of these ones I already have. Need to clear some of these out. I've got way too many. So up here, you can tab between your projects and creating a new project. So you're going to want to select new project. Right underneath the user profile here, you've got a location. So this is where it will save when you create it. So I mean, I save mine always in the same folder for home. And it's like a cloud synced area. But if you wanted to save somewhere else this project, that's where you'll set it. Project name, I'm just going to call this Avid Assist 100, and that'll be the name of the project. Format. So this is where you'll set your resolution and your frame rate. Now your resolution can be changed later, fairly easily. Your frame rate not so much. So just be sure of which one that you want to use when you start this out. And the frame rate that you'll most often want to use is the frame rate that you're going to deliver in, which might not necessarily be the same one they've shot in. They could be shooting a different frame rate for a reason, or they could have made a mistake. I've had whole shoot days accidentally shot at 25 FPS when we were doing a 24 FPS film. So it happens. So just make sure you know where this is destined to. For example, if you're in the UK and it's going to broadcast on TV, it's probably 25 FPS. For films, it's quite often 23.976 or 24. So yeah, just know where your project is destined for, know your end frame rate, and that's what you'll set it as. Now I will say that in here you can select from a whole host of presets. You can do a custom one. So for this one, I'm going to set 1080p 23.976. If there's one that you tend to use a lot, you can actually save it as a preset so that you can just call upon it whenever needed. And you can do that by configuring this whole page here, your resolution, your frame rate, your color space, which I'll talk about in a second. And then down here, there'll be a button. It's grayed out for me at the moment because everything I have here is already saved, to save preset. And then you can save it and call upon it. Now, the only other main one I want to touch on here is color space. Even though the main thing I'm going to say is that 9 times out of 10 you won't have to touch it. If you're onlining in Avid, that's something that you'll definitely need to know. For our purposes and for this course and talking about assisting, you'll almost always be using YCBCR 709, which is Avid's sort of preferred Rec 709 color space. And so if you're being delivered transcodes by a DIT or something like that, this is primarily the color space you'll be working in. But as you can see in the drop down menu, should you ever need them, all the different variations of color spaces, all the way up to aces, are there for you. Cool. Let's hit create here. Reading my settings, loading up Windows, and boom, it's created. Yeah! Now you'll see that our bin container up here only has one bin, which is always named after the project. I'm going to be saying some things which you may be grossly already familiar with, and some things you may not be. Have to sort of cater to all experience levels for the purposes of this type of course. So here's your default bin, and as an assistant, highly pays to be organized. So the more logical, organization you can have in your Avid project, the better. I was always taught the sort of methodology of if you were suddenly removed from the project for some reason and someone else was brought in at a moment's notice, they should be able to find absolutely everything where it is at a moment's notice. So that's what you should try and aim for. Now, in Avid, we can create folders and bins. Slightly different to Premiere, but same general idea to most other NLEs and file systems in general, really. And I'll show you the way that I will go about to organize this, which you could use as a foundation if you'd like to get started, and then customize it to whatever makes logical sense for you. So I'd like to make my folders and my basic layout within Avid. I have it set up already, and I have it in a bin here as just folders that I've made in Finder. I can copy these folders directly into my Avid project that I've made. So, sorry, need to back up a bit there. So you're going to want to navigate to the folder containing your Avid project. So in this case, here's mine. This is all my current Avid projects that are on my home system. And just go inside. Your Avid project will be there as a folder. Just jump inside it, and this will work the same whether you're on Mac or Windows. So if you're a primarily Windows user, it'll work exactly the same way. And then I've got my pre-set up folders, so I'm just going to copy and paste. Sweet, that's them in there. Now if I tab back to Avid, and I'll right click inside of my bin container and hit refresh, all those folders appear. So any changes that you make outside of Avid, or if you make a change in the project in Avid and then it's not showing up for your editor, even if you're on a shared storage solution, this is how you make it appear. Just a little right click refresh in this area. So yeah, this is my organizational layout. So you can see that they're all numbered, 1 to 11 in this case. And this is just to set it the order that it's sitting within Media Composer, because Avid's always going to organize it chronologically. And we want the folders that the editor's most likely to need and use most frequently up the top. Our stuff can be lower down the bottom, because I don't mind doing the scrolling. We're trying to save the editor time so they don't have to be scrolling up and down a bin container. And yeah, it just helps you set the hierarchy by putting numbers at the front. So I'll go down this list, 1 to 11, and just give a quick overview of what all these folders are for. So edits. This is just going to be where you'll have bins for all your edits. You could have a folder in there called Director's Cuts, or you could have one called Assemblies, stuff like that. Or however your editor wants to work. This is more for them than for you, but this is a folder specifically for them to contain their edits. And that's number 1 because that's the primary thing that they're going to always want to have open and use. Moving down, scenes to cut. So this is where during the shoot, as stuff is being shot and we're prepping scene bins and passing them to the editor, I'll drop them in here, and then they will have a list of scene bins that need to be worked on. So this is stuff they haven't assembled yet. This is stuff that, maybe there's still more footage to come. So say there's a scene where it's 2 people talking on a phone, they're in different locations, and we've only got one half of the conversation. They've shot person A on the phone, and they're still to shoot person B. They'll leave it in there because they can't fully cut it yet, and then it just gives them a reminder, oh, that scene's not quite finished yet. And likewise, number 3 is scenes cut. So as they finish a scene, this is sort of a workflow I've established with a lot of editors that I've worked with. As they assemble a scene, they'll drop it down into here, and then that's keeps that tidy and organized, and then they know all the scenes that they've worked on and the ones that they still need to do something with. Folder 4, sound effects. This is fairly self-explanatory. This is where you keep all your sound effects. Now you can be as organized as you like in here. You can have different sound effects bins for different categories of sound effects if you like. You could have one big bin and add a bin column categorizing it. However way you like to work. One thing I would say is that on top of all the bins that will ultimately be populated in here, I'll have a bin, just say something like to the effect of assist sound effects, just for example. Oh, and apparently I'm the assistant, I can't spell assist. There we go. And this will be just for me to import stuff. Reason being is quite often I'll be working with an editor and they'll have all their sound effects bins open, and then they'll ring my extension in my room. They're like, "Hey Jack, can you find, insert obscure sound effects here for me, please?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And so I'll go find whatever the sound effects is, import it into my assist sound effects bin, and then I'll ring them back up and say, "There, it's in this bin. I've saved the bin, closed the bin. Can you please grab it out of there and put it wherever you like in one of your bins?" This is particularly useful when I'm assisting multiple editors at once, like on a series, and then there's always a place that I can put it into. And it saves me creating new bins each time or asking them to close it while I put it in and then opening it again. But that's just a suggestion. However you want to work, works for me. Music, pretty much all the same explanation as sound effects got. Elements, this is kind of a generic, kind of vague folder, but it's for things to do with that production. So say if it's a series, a TV series, this is where I'll have titles, any titles or recurring transitions, or network tags or stuff that have to go onto it. End credits from last year that we're going to put in as a sort of placeholder. Anything like that, any kind of elements to do with the show that don't necessarily fit in any of the other folders, this is where I'll put them, and they'll be in there. Exports. Now we're into the assistant fun. So exports, I'll have a whole bunch of subfolders on here. So like to director, to grade, to network. I've just created these as sort of a foundation. For example, if I was working on a Netflix film, I wouldn't say to network, I'd say to Netflix. Just to be more specific, instead of to director, maybe say their name. And just folders to who each export is going to, what's it for. And this way I can, because you might have a day where you're doing a whole bunch of different exports, different deliverables or whatnot, and say sound want a test, for example, right? And so I create a bin and I go, firstly the date, 2022, 09, 11, and then a brief description of what it is. So say sound test. By the way, that date format, I'm assuming most of you will probably be familiar with it, but in case you aren't, year, month, day will always keep stuff chronologically organized. Recently was given stuff from a whole shoot's worth from a DIT that had it as, it was year, day, month. So it was very odd. That's always the best date format to use. You can drop the first two characters of year if you like. That could be 22, 09, 11. I just always like the complete thing. Anyway, I'm getting distracted again. So yes, in here I could have created my sound test, whatever, filled it up, I've exported the AFs, yada yada yada. Then I close this bin and I forget about it, go about my day. Few weeks pass and then I get an email from Sound and they're like, "Oh hey, can you check something on that sound test that you sent us on the 11th of September? And then I can go, "Oh, sent to Sound. Oh, on the 11th of September, there it is." Because I might have a whole bunch of these by that point. It's something that you're more likely to be asked from by a member of crew, maybe a DOP or a director, probably a director. I'd be like, "Hey, can you send me that cut that you sent me on?" Because they might not necessarily know the version number offhand, depending on how organized your director is. I like to use dates as a version anyway. I think it's just a lot clearer. I'll get to that later as well. But yeah, then you can call up the bin with the date and find the exact version very, very quickly and forward onto them. So that covers exports. Next down here is a sync. So under sync is just going to be, I like to have 2 bins per shoot day for syncing. So I'll have, say, day 1 will be a day 1 sync and day 1 subs. So a sync bin is where I'll have all my sync maps sequences, which I'll get to in this course as well. I'll show you how I do all that. This is how I have it organized. It'll be in there. So if there's like a 40-day shoot, then there'll be, day 1 sync, day 1 subs, day 2 sync, day 2 subs. And it just makes it very easy and clear to sort of, if you have to pull up anything from any particular shoot day, to go back to it and revisit it. If you have to recreate a subclip for any reason, you can call up your sync map very quickly. And likewise with my source rushes. So source rushes here is quite literally my source rushes, the source footage as you get it in. So this will be day 1 picture, day 1 sound, day 2 picture, day 2 sound, day 3 picture. You get the idea. And then number 10 down here, transfer. This is kind of just a tidy folder. So as editors may ask for things from the assistant, if you're creating bins to pass back and forth, then this is just a place for them to go. So if they ask you to bring in anything obscure that doesn't fit in the folders above, create a bin for it, name it logically, date it, import it in, and drag the bin down to here. You can tell that I'm trying to keep everything in folders as much as possible. I don't like stuff being left out. Like even this assist bin, I would delete. This standard bin, I would either rename it and use it for a purpose, probably more likely, or just get rid of it. That's how I like the project to always appear while I'm working on it. Some editors are more cooperative with helping with that than others, but it just helps in a lot of ways as the assistant to keep things as tidy as possible, so you can always find anything whenever you need it. And so that little transfer folder for passing stuff back and forth helps with that. Lastly is assist. So this is just your folder. Put whatever you want in here. So for the purposes of this video, I've put just 3 bins, which I'll show you. If you don't already have these, you can set them up at the start. So temp bin, I've always got a temp bin. I've just copied this from another project, but temp bin is just an empty bin that I'll open up when I need to do something specific, a specific task that I've been asked to do. Maybe I'll drag a copy of a sequence in here, check something, and then, I'll figure it out. That I tend to, whatever I do in here, I will get rid of out of this bin. I'll delete it out of this bin when I finish the task. It is a temp bin. It is for a one and done use, and then I'll clear it out. So at the beginning of each day, there should be an empty temp bin to be used. But I will admit, sometimes I end up with temp 2, temp 3, it depends on how things are going that day. But that's why I've got the assist folder, so we can sort of hide it away. So that covers temp bin. Bin display is a bin that I have set the bin display to show reference clips. So this means that whenever I drag a sequence into here, it will populate the bin with all of the clips in that sequence. This can be very useful for a variety of reasons, for checking things, for making sure things are working. If you need to apply metadata to a whole bunch of clips that are in a specific sequence, you can do that. For a variety of reasons, I think it helps to just have a bin display bin ready to go. And lastly here, I just call it filters, which is left over from the assistant that I stole this from, this idea from ages ago. I used to call it common effects, and then I nabbed his one. He called it filters, and his had a lot more effects in it than mine had, so I kind of stole it, and with his permission, and I've used it since. So this will just be a whole bunch of effects that you may or may not use very commonly. Stuff like respeeds, titles, like if you have an ID board layout, stuff like that. And you'll accumulate these as you go. Quite often you'll create them initially for a specific task. And then this is where I'll save them. So some of these can actually be cleaned out now, but many of them are still useful, so I sort of keep them here. You'll see I've put a little plus at the front of it. Just using that special character of a plus will throw any bin to the top of the hierarchy of wherever it is. So if I drag it out of this folder, it will go straight to the top of the project. If it's in any folder, it will be at the top of that folder. And because my filters bin is kind of the one I go to most of the time. Before I move away and start talking about settings though, another thing I like to do here is I personally like to set bin background colors. So for my filters, I'll generally have it purple, just as a salute to Avid. And you can actually see that here. So even if I don't have the bin open, it's colored there. And these are mainly so that it depends on what kind of screen real estate you have. But if I've got a whole bunch of bins open, I know there's my filters bin. Even if I have so many tabs that I can't read that filters there, I can just click on the purple bit, you know. So this definitely helps. That's just a little tidbit. Probably could have mentioned that later. Right, let's look at some settings. So to call up settings, if you're on a Mac, it's Command comma. If you're on Windows, it'll be Control-Shift=. I'll bring it up on Windows. But you can also go File, Settings, and it'll be there. So 4 tabs here. I'm just going to blitz through some of these a little bit because this may be familiar to a lot of you, but I'll still cover. So Format tab, a lot of this has already been set up when you created the project. So you can see the preset there. These are the same ones that you were offered when you were making your project. You can see that I can change my resolution to different things, but a lot of the frame rate options are grayed out. And that's for a reason. It can confuse a lot of things. So if you had to change the frame rate in the middle of a project, which you shouldn't, but if you had to, I'd just create another Avid project with the different frame rate and copy the bins across. But we can change the resolution at any time, along with our color space. Stereoscopic, you won't have to bother with. That's for 3D work that, you know, I've never once had to touch that. And even if you did, it's not for this Essentials assisting course. Mass margins, on the other hand, though. So say I'm in a 1080p project right now, but say I was using material, like say I was going to deliver in 235, right? So we can go up here to these mass margins presets, find 235 there. And then it'll tell you, which I find is quite nicely, sometimes I use this just as a calculator, it'll tell you the pixel equivalent within your project of 235. So it'll be now 1920 by 817. The percentage of the top and bottom that, you know, you're coming in. And if you hit apply, then that mask will be saved in the project, and you can have it automatically apply to your sequences. You can have it automatically be put on export. It's a very useful tool. We used it on a feature film for the whole duration of the edit. It was great. You can have another export preset that will ignore it. The only reason you would want to do that and use a timeline mask is if you wanted to put burn-ins inside the mask. You won't be able to do that with this method because it's the last thing to go and it's tacking them on right at the end as you go out. But yeah, this is very useful for aspect ratio work. If you're not working and if you're not going to be delivering in 16:9, I would recommend this. I do find it quite useful. Project settings over here. So there's a couple of things that I would tweak here. Audio project, I always set to 48 kilohertz, 24-bit, just to make sure that the sample rate and the bit depth of all the sound is the same. That does keep Avid happy. And then the other one under project that we'll be looking at is media creation. Now this is kind of essential that you set right at the start, especially if you're on a shared environment, you've got multiple editors, maybe multiple assistants even, and if you're using some kind of shared storage solution, like an Avid Nexus. You're going to want to go to media creation, and here is where you can set all your media when it's imported, when it's transcoded, when it's mixed down, when it's rendered. When you're creating any kind of media in Avid, you'll set what codec it goes to and what drive it's put on. And this is essential so that you don't have editors or other people on the project just dragging and dropping stuff in, and then it goes to the D drive of their machine or some, you know, portable drive that they've plugged in via USB, and then that media is now not available to everyone else on the project. And then you don't realize till later, and then it causes issues. So set your media creation right at the start when you're first building the project. Like say titles, for example. DNxHTSQ. I think that'd be a little bit overkill for titles, so I'm going to bump that down to LB. LB is kind of what I would mostly use for stuff anyway, so I'll actually go and hit apply to all. So for all of these, they're going to come in at LB. Nowadays, DNX is sort of similarly named to ProRes. Wrapper format, Avid OPRM. I mean, it's the only option there, but that's what you would want anyway. That's the Avid standard. So you'll notice that right underneath your video resolution, you can select your video drive. There's all the drives available to me on this machine right now. And you can hit apply to all for that as well if you like. But as I said before, if you're on a shared storage environment like a Nexus, then you might have a drive for your renders, a drive for your titles, a drive for your production media, your main media, then a drive for exports and stuff, which I'm a fan of. You know, if I was setting up a Nexus, then I would like a drive for projects, a drive for renders, and I would include titles and renders, I think. A drive for my production media, so the camera media and the sound media that's shot. Depending on where we're exporting stuff to, maybe another workspace just for that, for all my exports and deliveries and things. But sometimes you have a separate space for that. Having separate spaces and keeping everything organized, very good idea. And this is where you'll set it for each different variation. So for your titles, imports, mixdowns, transcodes, motion effects, renders, all that jazz. Now, with this being said, when you're doing a file import or you're bringing anything in at any point, or if you're doing a transcode, still take a quick look at the setting. Even if you set this in media creation, still make sure you're looking at the setting before you're just hitting render. Now jumping over to user. So here's where the bulk of the settings and customization in Avid live. The ones I'm going to go through specifically just now are the ones that I think you should give attention to right at the start of a project. But there's a whole host of settings that you should definitely check out when you have time. Go through all this stuff here and see what you can customize and see what you can use. So starting at the top, audio. I will go in here and just make sure this default pan for mono tracks. I always like this to be centered. If something's mono, it should be mono. And then we can pan it later if we want to. Alternating left and right means that, say, if there's two channels, two audio channels to a piece of sound you're importing, the first channel is going to pan to the left, the second channel is going to pan to the right. Now, if there was 6 channels, it's going to pan them left, right, left, right, left, right on the way in. I don't like this, especially since most of the time I'll work with one mono production mix track when I'm subclipping. So I'll always want that centered. I think that is the default, but I did get caught out on it once in a job, so I'll just double check that. Centered. Then if you jump down here to bin, this is where you'll set up your autosave. Extremely important. So autosave interval, I've generally just got all these set to 3. 333, just so that I always have a save that is no older than 3 minutes. By default, I think it's about 15 minutes. Just bring it in a bit, make sure it's more frequent. Maximum files in a project's attic. If you're not familiar, Avid is this thing called the Avid Attic. It's where it saves all of your bins, a copy of them every so often. This is where you can set how many files can be in the attic. Now, I would generally increase this a bit to say 2,200, say, and then every so often I'll empty out the attic, which I'll show you how to do again later on in the course, just so that it's not going to stop saving relatively soon. Cool, so that's the essentials for bin save. Now there are some really important other settings in here, but not crucial to project creation. So stuff like tabbing a bin into the active pane in a bin container, rather than floating the bin when you open one. Having border colors show up in frame view in the bin. Stuff like that, I think are important for me, but I'll leave you to take a look through those. If you are not using a breakout box or a client box for your Avid out, for like a client monitor or something, if you've just got like a dual setup, if you're working from home, something like that, you're going to want to select full screen playback here, and then this window that comes up, drag it to the monitor that you want to use for your full screen playback when you want to turn that on, and then just click select monitor. And that'll be that saved. If you had enabled mask margins earlier as well, then you can set this to do, mix to black, or it'll do like a 50% opacity mask on your full screen playback, or you can do a black mask, like a full mask, or no mask. This will set how it is automatically shown for you. You can do the same thing for your source and record windows, by the way, in the composer panel up here, and then in viewers, you can set your masks there the same, and it'll respect your mask margins as well. Scrolling down a bit, this one's a little bit more preferential, not quite essential, but I'm going to mention it anyway. So this is email settings. So this, you can have Avid set to email you when it finishes certain tasks, which can be very useful, particularly if you're working on a feature or something with really big timelines, where you're going to set it off to export or render and it's going to take a while. You can go get a cup of coffee, Avid will email you when it's done. So just set in your user credentials there. I will say that I have had some issues with Gmail on this, like the security thing, but live Microsoft accounts work perfectly fine. And then once you've set this all up, send a little test email. You'll get an email through and letting you know of the test. And then in future, you can set up whether it lets you know whenever you complete a render, an export, or a consolidate transcode. I don't bother with a render because I do a lot of like quick small renders, and so I'll just wait for those. But a full export and a consolidate, I like having an email to know about those. Import settings. Now, a couple of things that I'll just note here. So import settings, if you're going to be using image sequences, I will have ticked auto detect sequentially numbered files. So quite self-explanatory. It's just going to enable Avid to be able to see when a whole bunch of stills are named 1, 2, 3, 4 or sequentially numbered, and then that's an image sequence. I'll import it as one, and that's the main one that I'll have ticked there. I also like to have this set up here, image size adjustment to don't resize smaller images. So if I'm importing, say, something that's 720p and I'm in a 1080p project, don't resize it. If I want it resized, I'll do it myself in the project. The other essential one I'll note here is up in the audio tab. So this multi-channel audio up here, by default it should be set to none, but at the start of every project I make sure it's set to none. This is again to do with grouping and left and right, and how Avid will interpret sound on import. So it can be set to stereo stuff on import. You can even set it to interpret things as a 5.1 or a 7.1. And if this is a final mix, that can be great. That can be fantastic. But you can also, reconfigure this once it's imported. I like to bring in stuff as mono by default. If you're going to be importing a crap ton of sound effects or music that you all want in stereo, you could adjust it for then. Just remember to put it back. Right, now that covers all the project-specific settings that you'll need to know. There is a wide variety of settings that I would personally, can set up and customize more before I started, but they're unique to how I like to work and how I like to format things, and some of them are going to be mentioned later on in this course anyway. So I would just highly recommend that whenever you have time, if you're not familiar with it already, that is, go through the user settings. And just see what all your options are. Even if you already know Avid, if you haven't done it in a while and there's been a few updates since then, go check it out. Maybe there's been a whole bunch of new things added. For example, under bin settings, there's this lovely tick box that wasn't always there that skip prompts to save locked bins on autosave. So if I have a locked bin open, it used to always give me a prompt when it autosaved saying, "Whoa, this bin's locked. Do you want to save a copy of it? Because we can't autosave it because it's locked." So if I'm aware of that and I know I've got locked bins open and I know I can't save them, stop asking me, and you don't want it to come up every time you autosave, have that ticked and then it won't ask you. And that brings us to the end of project creation. So thank you for sticking with me on this first part in this series of course of Avid Essentials. Next one will be coming to you very soon. I'm living out of a hotel at the moment, so I've got some extra time. So I'm going to get this whole course ready and sent out to you really soon, as soon as I can. Aiming for one video every Thursday, We'll see if that happens. And thank you for watching and sticking with me, and I'll see you in the next one. Maybe, hopefully. You know, it'll be linked if I can. See ya.